this all works. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, great. Okay, fantastic. So yeah, I mean, it's been a pleasure. Ollie asked us to participate with a short keynote. I'm going to keep it short because I also love debating and not keeping for too long a monologue. So I'm actually currently talking to you out of the Ministry of Health, where we're currently working at. So this is why when Ollie asked us to join, it was very interesting to share also experience and insights, because we are focusing very much on the matter of digital and communication. So I just listened to Raban, your thoughts early on, and I think it's very crucial. So obviously, in the entire, let's say, crisis response, communication just plays a smaller part, but it is crucial, especially in times where digital has taken over and fragmented the media and the public sphere significantly. And this was kind of is one of our main missions. So very briefly, we're 25 people. We were founded in late 2016 and working in digital political communication. Basically using all various data sources you have, so that mostly is coming from the platforms, but also working with our own models and especially survey data, which has become increasingly important, obviously to GDPR and other measures to, let's say, permanently track and see how the public opinion and the mood is shifting. And then we have kind of various service tracks ranging from consulting to targeting, content execution, campaigning, and capacity building, which then is kind of transformed into our services. For myself, I've been working on various political campaigns. I was not working with the Chancellor, but rather for the Chancellor in 2013 as her youth and outreach coordinator for digital efforts. Same went for Juncker, and 2 years in Austria. And yeah, so we are very focused on the matter of digital communication, and that's what I intend to talk about today. And obviously, first is that we are entering unprecedented times. So I think for all of us who are working in the consultancy work, advising politicians, advising decision makers, this is something that is new to all of us. I mean, the IWF mentioned it earlier as well, that we are seeing not just the potentially worst economic crisis, but also entering a new dimension of social struggle, a new dimension of question of legitimacy of government. We've been seeing various governments coping and trying to find different tracks. So I think for communication, especially for digital, it's very crucial to start with a new and fresh approach to thinking, that there is no 1,000 template strategies that you can just pull out of various slides and you know, put them together and say, yeah, this is how we always have been doing it. Because from the experience that we gathered here over the first weeks, the communication landscape and the dimensions of escalation vary from day to day. So it's very hard to go by that. So I think mindset is very important, because literally on a daily basis, you see new situations popping up. And on the one hand, this great report by Edelman was conducted before Corona. But we see obviously on the one hand that especially in Western societies, a lot of people are fearing that the pace of technology is too fast, that, you know, the loss of feeling of control. And now we've seen that especially heavily in the face of fake news and disinformation, that people are looking for various sources because they don't trust what's coming out of governmental streams. So for organizations in the weeks and months to come, we will be seeing that in the first thing that we have an increasing polarization. So the first weeks have been predominantly covered by, let's say, a national consensus on the protective measures that need to be done in order to protect the health of the citizens. But as in Germany, and I'm sure in most European and Western countries now, we will enter a new phase where the health crisis has become a multi-dimensional crisis, meaning not just health dimensions, but sociological, economic, and many other factors are joining that. And for communication, it's very, very complex, because obviously one decision that is intended to protect, for instance, in the health situation, various risk groups, or to counter potential efforts, might affect other groups very heavily. So you will see an increasing polarization, especially coming from the economy, coming from businesses that are fearing for their existential crisis. And there have been first rough studies that obviously the secondary impact on health, meaning, for instance, if you have an increase of 5% in unemployment rate, the secondary damage in the mortality rate in terms of suicide, domestic violence, alcoholism, et cetera, is increasing as well. So this is obviously very difficult, and this brings me to my second point: political responsibility. People are looking now not just to government, but also public opinion leaders for guidance. And it becomes more important than ever that they feel that they have a sense of what's going on. And when we look in the past, and this has been something that we've been witnessing since we started a company, that people are fearing that government and political parties, politicians, business leaders are out of control in what's actually going on and how to communicate it in a multi-dimensional, multipolar world where many things are so connected. It's not so simple to explain citizens one thing and what impact has on other dimensions. And this is the need for not just the question of how can you make sense out of the data, what's actually going on in the conversations about you in the crisis, how do you need to respond, and what are your leaders doing, and how do they communicate via digital channels. So we, for instance, launched like 4 or 5 social media platforms in the matter of 4 weeks. And there was a lot of concern about data privacy. As you know, Germany is probably one of the most conservative countries when it comes to data privacy, and not just in terms of how do governments use the data, but also what kind of information is circulated there. And for communication, it's important, obviously, to have various scenarios in mind. And there has been a great article, if you haven't read it yet, I would definitely recommend doing it, by McKinsey, who kind of put up on a matrix and various scenarios in terms of what is also the economic impact and what is the trajectory that the coronavirus will have on the economy and society. And basically, that's something, no matter what your predominant focus in your organization is, you need to develop, having a kind of plan of the various scenarios in place and focusing on what can be the communicative expected measures that need to be done in order to A, inform the public, B, potentially convince or persuade journalists or opinion makers to make your case, and thirdly, but most importantly, to kind of predict of what will come next. So this is something that communication will need to anticipate much more strongly, because I know that currently in the corona crisis, most of the resources are bound to the actual crisis management, which is crucial. But I think in order to uphold legitimacy, uphold public awareness on your measures, and also uphold, let's say, acceptance of the measures in the general overall public, it's important that people understand what's going on, that they see what the impact is, and that they feel there is a transparent, open, and informative communication. This has been outlaid in various studies, and I think it's crucial to follow the path. And this is something that often is the problem when we talk about digital communication, that basically, when we talk about digital, so many people are talking about various things, right? When I say about digital crisis communication, one person talks about social media monitoring, the next one talks about capacity building, The next one talks about viral videos. The next one talks about performance marketing. And it's like the blind people in the ideology with the elephant, right? Everyone thinks they talk about the same, but we talk about different aspects and different things. So in that capacity, it's important that we differentiate in our mind 3 layers that are really, really relevant. The first one is communication. Obviously, everything that goes out on a daily basis, especially on digital, needs to be checked, fact-checked by various teams in order for not just the truth in its content, but also much more about the relevant context on the platform. So if you go on Instagram or a blog post or on YouTube, various ranging to, for instance, TikTok, you have a whole range of different audiences and different platform specifics that you need to take into account when planning your content already early on. Also in terms of how complex and how long should the content be and how much it can entail. But this is just basically the tip of the iceberg, because the second layer, strategy, is much more important. And this is the problem in crisis communication. You rarely have time to develop a coherent strategy, whereas usually you would have weeks in order to deploy, craft, and execute a strategy in terms of communication. In crisis moments, you often have just a couple of hours. So it's about the minimum, let's say, strategy that you can ensure and go back to it the next day and see if it was successful or not. Did it generate the right resonance? Was it what you promised it would do, and did it deliver? But the most crucial thing, and this is the third layer, which is often forgotten, is capacity building, talking about infrastructure. Because infrastructure is so important. If you don't have the people, if you don't have the skill set, if you don't have the technology in place, all of your, let's say, expertise will be lost in the crowd, because so many, or especially in the public field, so many organizations do not have the capacity and do not have the time in a crisis mode to, just hire a couple of agencies to do that. So this is, for instance, like from our experience and our approach, why embedded consulting or embedded execution becomes much more important. So that you send a couple of people, they go into the organization, they build capacity on the ground, they help building up infrastructure, and then they leave again. So the organization itself is able to carry out the required communication capabilities. But this is often forgotten in crisis mode, and I've seen it in a couple of ministries here in Germany, that you do not have the mindset, especially from decision makers in place, that in the crisis mode you need to have a fast team that is able to execute and do it in a very high speed manner. And the typical agency relationship does not cover that, because people are working on various clients. You're not usually the only client to serve. So this is a big problem. So capacity building is crucial to see what really are the tools the organization needs, what are the people they need, and how quickly, how fast can you deliver them. So if a call comes on Thursday evening, are you able to deliver 5 or 10 people to the organization on Monday, and they appear and help building the capacity within a matter of days? And again, I'm not making advertisement here for McKinsey. I just found it a very great visualization of the capacity building process. So, and I can only agree to that, because basically it's important now with the crisis team and whatever your organization's primary communicative objective is, to have a plan ahead team. So now is a time, in case you're already doing the communication planning potentially for spring, summer, and the fall, and the, let's say, consequences we already can anticipate in terms of economy, in terms of politics, in terms of polarization, etc. What are the strategies that we can already plan and model around what are the resources we need potentially, what are the skills that our people will need, and do we have someone in charge of that. So that is something I would definitely advise in terms of communication, developing those strategies early on, because it will save your time and potentially your ass later. Sorry for the language. And 3 factors for that is obviously that in digital, the first and the most important factor for digital impact is attention. If we don't get the attention of the user, we basically don't exist. So not just is in that case a larger part of the chunk of digital media important for digital advertisement, but also if you have a shortage of resources, where to spend it in order to ensure maximizing attention. So what are the content pieces you really want to push out? What are potentially multipliers you can use? Finland did a great pioneer project in launching the first national influencer platform where people can get the content and spread it out to their respective messengers. And how can you use data in order to ensure that you speak to those people who paid attention to you and involve them, and ultimately, in the best case, mobilize them? Mobilize, obviously, depending on the cause of your organization. If it is, for instance, to get people to get active, to help elderly people, to uphold preventive measures in terms of health and safety measures, etc., it depends. But how can you get those people active? And the primary objective should be to build up a communication model which helps you understand where you're at and what can you do. So here is, for instance, one example that we see the usual curve in terms of acceptance of measures, especially when it comes to Corona and the potential implication it has, and the other curve, meaning the damage it would cause to society in the various dimensions. So this is just one example how you can go in the public sector. Is obviously the first primary objective should be inform the public of what's going on, be transparent about it in order to avoid potential rumors of conspiracy theories. And the second and third objective should be prolonging acceptance. So how people are more likely to accept the implications it has on their everyday lives and the restrictions, if they see it makes sense to protect their families, to protect their grandfathers, to protect their children, etc., etc. And the third layer is then to activate public support. Now, this can be, in different tracks. You can go down a nationalist track, which is the rhetoric, for instance, France has chosen, or a couple of other European countries talking about warfare, the invisible enemy, and so on. You can also talk about just the general buildup of civil society and strengthening the social aspect of it. How you do it ultimately depends very much on national terms and on culture, but it is important that you undergo those 3 steps. And looking at the watch, I will just share a couple of more things. It's important that obviously when we talk about the fragmented sphere, how can we differentiate our communication in various layers? So just give you one example from Germany. As you maybe have heard, the district of Heinsberg, which is on the border in the west of Germany, has been one of the most heavily affected areas in Germany of the Corona crisis. And do you build up a layer? For instance, this was early on in the state of mid-February, where you would have an area which is the immediately affected area, a surrounding district, and unaffected areas. And you have various communication layers, for instance, talking about escalation. So really showing people, okay, what do you need to do now in order to follow the health and safety regulations, in terms of really showing instruction what to do in order to protect your families and your friends, the surrounding districts, and going more about the more preventive measures. What can you do to decrease the likelihood of getting infected with the virus? And in other areas, this was the case. It's more about informing what is the virus actually, how does it work, etc., etc., debunking myths. And when we talk about the problem of fake news, it often comes down to the ability for real rapid response. That meaning you have three kind of layers. You go first in the learning stage, where you take social media tools like Talkwalker, Brandwatch, Hootsuite, whatsoever, what is best suitable. And you define the criteria which are important to you in order for debunking fake news. And the second point then comes to the question of analyzing it and seeing, okay, is this something you will go into? Because you will not go into every fake news. There's so many crazy stuff out there. And sometimes even if it's a public organization, you go in, you kind of make them more important as they are. Like, for instance, I would go into a YouTube video with a conspiracy theorist, and you go in as the ministry and you kind of try to debunk it. You actually, the original video will get much more views than it originally would do. So it's a very thin line in order to predict what is right, what is wrong. And the second step then comes to messaging, where you need to go and develop a kind of responsive content and directly addresses the main point that we're originally outlined in the fake news cluster, and then go in and kind of use the targeting methods traditionally from performance marketing to go in and try to debunk it. And yeah, that's basically the core, let's say, a couple of examples of approach in terms of communication. Again, I can only say, and as a last point, that the communicative layer is obviously integrated in a much more complex structure, and that in crisis response and crisis articulation, communication is not the, let's say, uttermost important silo or structure, but it is crucially important that you include the communication team and you include a communication strategy early on in the process, anticipating what response measures you will take in order to avoid public disapproval of your measures, and to ensure to prolong acceptance and keep the public informed, which is and should be the uttermost priority of any public organization in those unprecedented times. So thank you very much. And if you have any further questions, here are some contact details. Feel free to contact us. And yeah, thank you very much for the attention.